Namaskar. Many governments in the world, especially in the West, are seen to be getting more and more autocratic and coercive in forcing all types of antisocial and unjust vaccine mandates. And simultaneously, in what is seen as a shocking development, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, last week endorsed vaccine mandates. In an editorial page article in the New York Times, the ACLU adopted the argument that coercive vaccine mandates actually furthers civil liberties. Yes, you heard that right. This argument can only be considered crazy because this agency, the ACLU, whose middle name is Civil Liberty, whose role is to call out and resist excessive government force, whose job is to defend fundamental civil rights of citizens, is now suddenly supporting the murder of civil liberties. By saying that it supports the forced vaccine mandates, the ACLU, which supposedly represents liberals and liberal values, is really saying this, that it supports physical bodily harm through forced inoculation, that it supports denial of basic freedom of movement and restrictions to entry to public spaces, that it supports denial of basic social services. You can be stopped right at the gate of your bank or your post office. That it supports denial of livelihood itself. Because if you do not submit to this coercion, then you even have a chance of being fired from your job. Now, why is all this so shocking? Because historically, the ACLU has always vehemently opposed similar actions. In 2008, a deadly virus, the H1N1, was spreading around the world, and authorities in New York issued a mandate that all health workers in the state be vaccinated. The American Civil Liberties Union objected, it resisted, and rejected this proposal. And what it wrote at that time is quite revealing. It said that forced vaccination is not warranted, that individuals have a constitutional right to bodily autonomy, and that ordering people to choose between a vaccine and losing their job, which is what is happening now, is coercive, invasive, and unjustifiably intrudes upon their fundamental rights. Well said, and absolutely right. And this stand was roundly supported by all at that time. Now, this was not a one-off reaction. Let me state that later ACLU published a comprehensive report on pandemics, especially on pandemics, with one primary purpose: to denounce as dangerous and unnecessary attempts by the state to mandate, to coerce, to control in the name of protecting the public from pandemics. It is amazing. I mean, what a turnaround it has been. And for reasons not very well known up till now, we can only speculate. Let me continue. The ACLU said, and I quote, "Not all public health interventions have been benign or beneficial. Too often, fears aroused by disease and epidemics have encouraged abuses of state power. Atrocities, large and small, have been committed in the name of protecting the people's health." Now, this stand has continued. Even in 2015, the ACLU issued a statement during the Ebola epidemic, if I'm not mistaken, and that contained a similar message. It warned against politically motivated and scientifically unwarranted quarantines, which the report at that time found violated individuals' rights and hampered efforts to end the outbreak. So vaccine mandates can actually hamper efforts to end the outbreak rather than help in containing the outbreak. And then, surprise, in May last year, in May of 2020, after the outbreak of the new coronavirus, a report by the ACLU warned of the serious dangers of immunity passports. Can you believe it? They anticipated that this may happen and warned against it, saying that this will lead to a new health infrastructure surveillance that endangers privacy rights. So what happened? What changed? The ACLU has said that it looked at three questions before arriving at this remarkable turnaround decision. The first is, what is the risk to public health? Second, how effective is the vaccine? And third, what are the alternatives? And it is remarkable that he's actually sharing these questions with us, because the answer to these is publicly available through 18 months of medical research, scientific data, the statements of physicians working on the front line of this COVID crisis, by empirical data coming from all over the world. Let us look at the answers to those questions. What is the risk to public health? We know now from all data available that the risk to public health was vastly exaggerated by the government and medical bureaucracy, which is the medical authorities who are in charge at various governments. How do we know that? Because they claim that the fatality rate of this virus will be 10 times, 20 times, 30 times that of influenza. And they went on to say that 10% of the world's population could die, and all that is fiction. It is not even good science fiction. It is just fiction invented for commerce. I mean, that's how it appears now. Because the fact remains, and you can look up some of the earlier videos in this channel to know the source and the exact figures, that the infection fatality ratio from the research of 18 months so far is roughly between 0.1 and 0.27 in about a dozen countries that I have researched and shared with you in this channel. 0.1, even less than 0.1 in some countries, to 0.27 even in a country like the US, which has seen in portions of in its cities some major crisis. So what is the risk to public health? That answers the question. The second is, how effective is the vaccine? And here I'm amazed, I'm aghast that these intellectuals, in the ACLU could not even get the basic raw data that is coming every day, showing that the vaccines are not as effective as they thought. The vaccine is not as effective as they hoped. It is not as effective as they claimed. Month after month, new reports, new data is showing that the effect of vaccines is waning. It is waning rapidly. It is ineffective against new variants, and that the vaccinated are not only getting the infection but also spreading the infection. That answers the question number 2 as to how effective is the vaccine. The third is, what are the alternatives? Now, this of course needs a little more scientific background research and research with an open mind, and not just being slaves to the medical bureaucracy of the FDA and the CDC and the WHO. But if they had researched with an open mind, they would have found remarkable alternatives, which have been shared by leading physicians, by scientists, by medical researchers and journalists on the internet. The mainstream media like the New York Times may not have carried it, but the alternatives are there. Early treatment is one. That was a basic fault in strategy by the FDA, that be at home, wait till it gets serious and then come to the hospital. Wrong. Now worldwide it is being proven. There are many countries like South Africa, like India, which have actually experimented successfully and proven this, that early treatment, catching it right at the first stage and preventing it from getting serious, remarkably reduces the rate of hospitalization. Second, alternative treatments. There are so many alternative treatments being used successfully, being tried, tested, studied and reported. I'll just take 2 or 3 examples. One is the use of antihistamines by a leading doctor, Dr. Chetty in South Africa. The other is the widespread use of ivermectin in about, at least I think, 50 to 70 countries. I know definitely of India and the US, where it is used successfully with study reports available. Now, one final question on which we may speculate upon. By speculate, I would like to try some intelligent guesswork rather than some random answer picked out of a box. You see, the limited vaccine mandates adopted during the H1N1 epidemic in 2008, they pale in comparison with the draconian Hitlerian directives now being adopted by governments all over the world. Now, there are many critics of these mandates, including physicians and scientists who have gone to court, including professors, academicians, researchers, who are challenging these policies on the ground wherever they are, with their employers, with their state governments, with even the Supreme Court in some cases. Now, some of these organizations have also naturally approached the ACLU saying, okay, help us, support us, which they used to do in the past. Instead, the Civil Liberties Union, it's a shame that they should drop these two names from their organization's name. They have instead joined the other side. Now, what do we call this? I mean, in English, turncoat, renegade, traitor to the cause. But if we go deeply, the useful thing is not to call them names, but to try and analyze what has corrupted their mind. And I think there are two reasons. I'm at a distance, even though I'm a student of international politics and society. And as a journalist, I keep a close tab on things, especially scientific happenings. I do see, because I'm at a little distance from the USA, that there has been too much of this binary, fight, which has really increased in the last 6 to 7 years. Now, it's either you have to be a liberal or you have to be a conservative. You have to be a Democrat or a Republican. You have to be a Trump supporter or a Trump hater. I mean, it's getting it's gone to a point where it is not producing useful results for society. I will take the example of Mahatma Gandhi from India, who can be a better liberal than him? A man who founded his principles on non-violence, and who can be a more religious person than him, who founded his daily life and living on spiritual practice. Now we have ended up at a space in the world, and I feel it's important to focus on the US because many educated elite all over the world, including in India, are copying what is happening by the elite in the US. And this kind of demarcation of two very rigid, mutually exclusive groups, either you have to be a liberal atheist or you have to be a religious bigot, however it's pronounced. I think that is not true at all. In fact, I would say that the reason for these liberals to have gone extreme, the reason for the liberal side to have become themselves, extremists and, as some journalists say, even liberal lunatics, is probably because when they were tested the most, when their liberal ideals were tested the most during the 4 years of Donald Trump, they found themselves wanting. They were not strong enough. They were really not strong enough, because if their faith in their cause was pure, then even a Donald Trump should not have brought out the hatred in them. It should not have brought out these extremist thing in them to the extent that liberals. I don't subscribe to these groups by name, but because conventionally they are now called that. Let me put it this way, that many people who consider themselves liberals, they must look inside how in the last 5 to 6 years they themselves have become authoritarian, they have become hate-filled, and they have become political rather than fight for the citizen on the ground. And here, that is what has happened. Obviously, the ACLU has done this to help the Biden administration. It is a purely political and disastrous decision as far as civil liberties is concerned. Let us think about these things. Namaskar.